In this session, we're going to be building a simple model-driven Power App. Now, the very first question that a lot of people will have will be to wonder what exactly is a model-driven Power App, and essentially it is an app where a lot of the user experience is actually already pre-prepared for you. And so when we think about model-driven apps, it's customization, whereas when we think about the likes of Canvas apps, there's an awful lot of control over the user experience that we create. But on the flip side, it can take a lot longer to build a Canvas app compared to a model-driven app. When we sort of describe model-driven apps, it's easier to think of a model-driven app as a data model-driven app, and that's because it has to be built over Dataverse. Now, the demo that we're going to do is the idea of a simple IT help desk. How could we build a model-driven app that kind of reflects that sort of experience? So we're going to be thinking about the fields that we need to create, that's the columns as they call them, and how we make that fit our business problem. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of model-driven apps, they only ever get built over Dataverse. They're intrinsically linked to Dataverse, and there are a lot of positives to that experience, and it means that we can move them between Dataverse databases very easily. So let's take a look at a demo of the simple IT help desk using a model-driven app. This is the model-driven app. We actually have two tables, a contacts table and an IT requests table. I can go to the contacts table and create a new contact. So if I go to new, and I can say, well, this is Joe, selecting there, Joe blogs, and then go save and close. I can then go on to the IT requests, and I can add a new request. So I can actually use the stages here to actually add in a contact. So there's my Joe blogs, request detail, demo, and the request name, demo 123. That completes that stage. And I go on to the new stage, the number of users affected, say 4, and the severity is medium. And we can also add in additional fields ourselves. I didn't put those into the stages, but I can actually indicate the date that this is related to, the priority, which actually can only be between 1 and 4. So let's make this a 1. And then there's the status, which could be new in this case. If I save that, then that is the record saved, and we actually look at the view. We can see that our view has actually indicated the newly created record here, demo 123. That takes us to the end of the demo. Let's head back and find out a little bit more about model-driven apps. And before we start building the model-driven app, we need to return to some study ideas and concepts. So the first one of those is the idea that we have within our Dataverse database, we have tables. Now, the tables can also be called entities, and we will see later on they sometimes do get called entities. Now, tables have things called columns, which you can also think as being fields as well. Now, columns can be things like text, picture. We can have email fields. We can have GUID fields, and so on. So there's lots of different field types, and we'll see some simple field types as we go through that. As well as having columns associated with them, tables have forms associated with them, and we'll see that it's actually relatively easy to build those. So it's really an interesting concept that the columns and particularly in the forms, and as we'll see later on, the views are associated with these. Now, one other thing that we'll also see is that we can build simple business process flows that make it a little bit easier for people to complete our forms. So they allow us to step through the user experience. So moving on to the views. Views are essentially a tabular representation of the data that we have in our tables, and you can have more than one view for a table depending on what your needs are. Finally, when we think about a data model, it really has to have relationships between different tables. So if you think about when we create what will be our IT request, it will relate to a contact, and actually a contact may well relate to an account that we may have. Now we're going to move on to the app building demo, and in fact there are two different ways of us actually building a model driven app. There's actually the modern method, which is a very much a visual way in which we build the model driven app. So we'll actually see that we will see as we build the app how it's going to appear. And there's actually a classic way of doing it where you have to kind of think a little bit more about how the app is actually going to appear, but they both do the same thing, and you can actually switch between the two of them. So what we're going to do now is we are going to head over to Dataverse, and we are going to start building the model driven app. The place that we're going to start with building this model-driven app is in make.powerapps.com. I'm in make.preview.powerapps.com, so I've got all of the latest experience. And although we could start building our tables and just hit the drop down here and start building new tables here, that would not be the right thing to do. It'd be really tempting to do it. It's not the right thing to do. What we're going to do is go down to solutions, and we're going to create a new solution. And what we're going to do is we're going to give it a display name. So I'll say IT Helpdesk. And then I'm going to select a publisher. Now you may choose to select a default publisher, and I'm going to choose the hybrid publisher here. And that means that all of my objects will be prefixed with hybrid when they are created. So I'm now going to click create. That's going to create the solution, which is going to be the container for the tables and the model-driven app. And if I created a Canvas app, it would also be contained there. So I'm now going to click on the IT Helpdesk demo solution. And now I'm going to start to create tables. Now I could bring in some tables that already exist, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start building the very first table. We're going to say new table. And I'm just going to give it a simple name, and that's going to be IT request. And it's given a plural name of IT request. Now, I guess I could call the table IT, I could just call it request if I wanted to, if I thought that maybe it would be used for lots of other different things. In actual fact, within Dynamics, you have a table called case, and it'd be much more like a case table. But I'm going to stick with IT request and then click save. Now do be careful on the primary column. So I typically don't call it the straight name field. I would typically call it something that I would be able to find, something like IT underscore request name. In fact, it doesn't like IT request name, but it'll probably actually just push them together. And what that means is if I then start to create something using Power BI, I can actually find the field a bit more easily. Let's just check the advanced options. Yeah, you can see that it's actually pushed the field names together, so it says IT request name, but that will be something that I can go and look at in Power BI if I so choose. So it's a little bit better. In fact, I would always do that for my primary column. I'm going to maybe call it IT request name. That's fine. You can agonize over this for a long time, but let's click save on that. So this would be almost like the summary of the issue that someone's got. And maybe we'll need a detail field as well. So now that it's actually created the table, I'm going to go back in again. We could have done all of this at the start in actual fact, and we're going to add some more fields. We can see it's created a lot of fields already. If those are sort of getting in your way, what you can do is go up to the default and then just say, well, actually, I only want my custom fields. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to add some entries in here. So perhaps the first thing that we can do is we can have some detail here. So let's add a column in here. We can give it as a text. We can say it's actually required, so we can put in required there, and we can then say request detail and click done. Then we would need to save the table first. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some more fields. So we're going to go with the date request. We're going to go for a contact. So we'll look out, and that's creating a relationship. And we will also put in a priority to get a level of importance of it. And we'll also do a choice field for the severity, and also pop in a field for the users affected, and that'll be a number field. So I'm going to do that now. As you can see, I put in a number of the fields, but what I haven't done so far is put in a severity field, and I also think I need a status field as well. So then both of those are going to be choice fields. So they work in a slightly different way. So what I'm now going to do is add in the severity. So we'll put in severity. And what we'll need to do is we will need to make sure that it's actually a choice field. And we need to say which choices they are. Now we don't have a choice field here, so we'll say new choice, and we'll say low, add new item, medium, and high. And we'll save that. Once we've saved that choice category within Dataverse, we then need to select it for the field and then select done on that. We also need to put in a status column here. So we'll do add column and we'll call it status. And we may find that there's actually one available for us. So if I go to choice and I do the choice field and I actually take a look at see which options are available here. We don't actually have a status field here. In fact, you could say workflow stage. We could have a take a look at there and see what options there are. And we can actually see what the choices are. In fact, we won't be using that because there aren't very many useful ones at this point here. So what we're going to do instead is we are going to go and click new choice. And then what we'll do is we'll say it's status, that's fine. And we'll say the status is new, active. Let's say it's blocked. And we could say another one of resolved and then perhaps archived. And then click save and done. What we can now do is we can move over to looking at the extra field that we haven't done in so far, and we haven't actually put in the contact field. So what we need to do with that is we are actually going to create a relationship. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click save table just to make sure that's actually registered correctly. Click save table. It will only take a few seconds. But if we were to actually look at the forms, we would actually see that clearly we don't have a contact at the moment, so we don't actually even know who this actually relates to. So the way in which we should do that is by creating a relationship between this and the contacts table. What I'm going to do there is just have a quick look at the contacts table. So if we go to tables and we do add existing, and then we go on to table, and then go on to contacts. This is a table that already exists, so we can't do too much with it, but it already has lots of fields that are quite useful to us. So we're going to bring that in and we're going to click add, and we can take a look at that table. We could have done it outside the solution, but we're going to take a look at that table now. We can see all the columns here in a moment, and in fact if I go onto the forms, I'm looking at the custom fields here. I need to look at all of the fields. If I go on to the forms, it's a little easier to see what's going on here. I'm going to look at the main form. You'll see there's a lot of fields here to do with the contact. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to create a relationship between the request table and the contact table, because we've got lots of interesting information to do with our contacts, like their phone numbers, etc., etc. So I'm going to head back, and I am then going to go on to the IT request table. IT request. Then I'm going to go on to the relationships, and then I'm going to add a relationship, and it is going to be a many-to-one, and that is because there's only one instance of each contact within the contacts table. So there's a many-to-one, and then we say which table is it related to. It's actually related to the contact table. Select contact, and we can actually do little things here if we wish to change the name of the relationship, so it's perhaps easier to look up later on. And I'm going to say it is a one-to-many. And change that there. You don't have to do that. I'm going to click done on that. So that's relationship has been created. And we're going to look at the custom fields here. And you can actually see the contact has been created. It's a lookup field here. And I'm going to click save table. So now it just starts to get a little bit interesting at this point in time, because we are now going to start to be able to see things within, things start to light up. So the next thing we're actually going to do is create a form that reflects this IT request. So if we go over to the forms, then what we'll see is we've gone to the main form, That's the one that I would direct you to begin with, and we'll see that there's not an awful lot in there to begin with. It'll just guess that we need these particular fields. But if we actually expand this and look at the table columns, we can actually see that the new fields that we created are in here, and I'm not sure if we can actually filter. So I'm going to go for my custom columns that I brought in. I'm just going to literally drag these in there. If I double click them, they'll all just go in there, and they're now showing here. I am actually going to remove this owner one here. I don't actually, in fact, I can hide that, or I can just move that down to the bottom. That would essentially mean that I'm the owner of the record. Now, I notice this request detail here, and I also think that this perhaps isn't necessarily the perfect field, because actually I just put a text field in, and it's a text field with only 100 characters in, which wouldn't actually be enough to create the request. So I'm going to move that up there, and we've got the contact there, and we could even put the account if we wanted to, in terms of create another relationship. We've now created the form, and now we can create a view. And the reason why this is all relevant is because when we were looking at the model driven app, those are the things that we needed in order for it to be effective. So I'm going to click general, and it's upset with me there. So I'll just make sure I click general there as well. Now I can publish at this stage if I wish to, but in fact what I'll do later on is I'll publish everything at the same time. So I'm going to click back. You do need to make sure you click the save though. Click back on that. That takes us back to the Solution Explorer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the views, and it does get a little bit interesting here. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to look at the active IT request, which is your main view that you're going to be experiencing when you build things. And I'm also going to filter this down here to the custom fields, and I'm also just going to add these in really quickly, all of them going in nice and quickly, and then I'm going to save that, and I'm going to hit the back button again. So we've actually got our views, but of course we haven't created any records yet, so I'm going to click the back button. And we're very, very close to being able to build a model-driven app at this point, because we have a table, and it's got a view and a form. That's really all you need to be able to start building a model-driven app. And also in terms of the contacts, well, all of the views and the forms are already built for us. So if we actually go back to the tables here, and we look at the contact and go onto the views here, then what we'll see is that if we actually look at the active contacts, then we'll actually be able to see that view has already been created for us. So there's lots of views there already. There's just a few names on the screen, really not very much information been put in there at all, but enough information for our purposes. So what I'm now going to do is click back, and we're actually going to now finally start building a model-driven app. Now, if you remember, there were two ways for us to build a model-driven app. There's the modern way of building a model-driven app, and there's also the classic way of building a model-driven app. And we're actually going to start with the modern way of building it, because that will be your new experience for building model-driven apps. We're going to head over to the solution, because we need to make sure that we go to under apps, and we're going to click new, and we are going to do an app, and it's a model-driven app. Now we have a choice here. If you remember, we have the modern app designer and the classic app designer, and we're going to go with modern app designer because it shows us what it's going to look like when it's built. So I'm now going to click create there, and I'm going to say it's the IT Helpdesk MD. Then click create. Now with the modern experience, you have this concept of pages. So you can either add a page down here or at the top here. So add a page, and we do this table-based view and form. So if you click next on there, we can then select the tables that relate to this app. Now, if you remember earlier on, I didn't publish the updates. Consequently, when I go start looking for the table, particularly the help desk one, I'm not going to find this. So if I start looking for IT and help desk, it's not there. So, and if I look for help desk, it's also not there. So I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to go back. I will be able to return to this, which is an interesting experience anyway, because there's a particular way to get there. And what I'm going to do is if I go to all and I go to publish all customizations, that's going to commit all the changes that we've made fully into Dataverse, which means when we build our model of an app, we'll actually be able to select it correctly. Now, when it's published, everything, we get our nice green bar here, and we want to return to our model of an app. And the way to do that at this point here, and you may need to be a little bit careful, is at the moment we want to edit in preview. That takes us back to that modern experience. So edit in preview, and then it's going to load this app up for us. We're now going to add a page. It's going to be a table-based view and form. Then I'm going to go and look at the IT request. I was struggling a little bit with the search on this, but there goes IT request. Select that. I'm also going to bring in the contacts table because I do actually use that. Of course, I need to select that correctly. So contacts, contact. There we are. Bring that in, add it in there, and we've actually got two tables that we brought in: our IT requests, which actually have no requests so far, and also our contacts. And we can actually start to see what this is going to be like for someone. So what we can do is we actually click the new on there, and we can say demo request and request detail here. And we can then search for a contract. So we can actually select Julian here. And we can then say maybe the date that this was requested. So this is potentially a field that we might not need. It might be an odd sort of one to put in. And we can then say the priority. So we can give that a priority of, let's say 2. And the severity, we've got the drop down for that. So let's say it's a medium. The status, which is going to be new, and the users affected, which could be, let's say there's 5 users affected, and then we can save and close that. And then what we'll see is in that view of the active requests, it's actually coming through correctly. So this is a very, very good experience of what it's going to be like. Now, when we actually go and look at the contacts, we can select the contacts. We can add a new contact. So what we can actually say is new, and we can say this is demo, and it's going to be contact, and then save and close on that. And that means that if we were to create a new IT request here, we could go new, and so demo with new contact. Test, and we can then say the contact, and that's our demo contact there. Now, we didn't make the priority, severity, status, etc. fields mandatory. We could do, and that's why you can see that there's a little star next to the request detail and the IT request name, because those are mandatory fields. So I can now select save and close, and we've actually just about built our model-driven app. I can now select save on that. I can select publish in just a moment and then play it. And what we're going to do very shortly is we will build the same app using the classic experience. So I'm going to select publish on that, and then we'll select play. Now, before we do that, let's remind ourselves this is actually a responsive by design product. So if I actually hit select desktop, I get one view, select tablet, I get a slightly different view. And if I select phone, this is how it's going to appear on a phone. So it's actually quite a good experience. And I can actually see the experience from within the design process. So now if I select play, it's actually going to open this up as a user might see it. So actually it's defaulting to my active contacts. So in actual fact, I'd probably switch it around so that the IT request was on the top. And if I actually move to IT requests, then I can actually create a new IT request. If we return to the Solution Explorer, we can see that we've actually built a model-driven app and this idea of a sitemap. So a sitemap is effectively a navigation experience. Now, I did say earlier on that I would show you two different ways of building a model-driven app. So here is the second way of building the model-driven app. So what we do is we go to New, and we go to App, and we're going to go to Model-Driven App, and then this time we're going to use the classic app designer. I'm going to keep it really simple on this occasion, but we're going to build essentially the same experience. So, and we're going to call it MD Classic. They are effectively the same thing anyway. And I'm going to select Done. So that's the app itself. And then what I'm going to do is you have to kind of create this strange thing called a sitemap, but we effectively did it on a drag and drop basis earlier on. So what we need to do is we need to select on the sitemap, and then we need to select the sub area, then click Add. In fact, we'll add the sub area. It's actually defaulting to adding a sub area anyway. We'll do select type, and remember that a table and an entity are the same thing. So I'm going to select an entity, and this time I'm going to select the IT, I think it's underscore request. So that's us selecting the IT request. And then secondly, we're going to do the same again, and we're going to do contact. There we are, selected the contact, and then we can go save, and then we can publish that, and we can do a save and close on that as well. So save and close. And then what you'll see is this area then sort of lights up. Now what you'll find is that when we select save, save and close, we do this validate and publish, it will come up with an error. So if I do save, that's one part of the process. And if I validate this, what it'll do is it'll come up with some errors. And the reason for that is because we haven't actually selected any specific view. So basically everyone's going to see all the views and all the forms that are available. And that might be quite a lot of them. So we might want to have a slightly different experience. I can then select publish, and then I can actually play it as well. So I can now select play. And you'll find that because we are selecting the same entities, it's almost an identical experience. It's the same thing. And so we can select new and it will work in exactly the same way. So that's the second way of building a model-driven app. And for many years, that was the way of building a model-driven app. So when we return to the solution, what we'll see is there are actually two different sitemaps and two model-driven apps. And if we actually look at the IT Helpdesk MD, which is the one that we originally created using the modern method, what we can actually do is we can hit the dots there, and we can go to edit, and we can do, if we actually go ahead and hit straight edit, this will actually open it in the classic view. It's actually the same thing that we've created in each instance. And in fact, the same follows that we can actually open the one that we created in a classic basis, we can actually open that in a modern fashion. So you're not limited by the way in which you first started creating the app. So we can see here, there's the model-driven app classic. We actually go to the model-driven app, click the drop down there, and then do edit in preview this time. So be careful about that step there. And now we're looking at the model-driven app that we initially spun up as in the classic method. This is the modern method of building the same app. And the final thing that we're actually going to do is we will take a look at how we build a business process flow. Now, all a business process flow is something that walks you through how to build the contents of the particular record that you're actually using at the time. But the way in which we build is kind of feels unusual. We actually have to start from outside the solution and then bring it into the solution. So what we'll do is we'll go back to solutions here, and then we'll go down to flows. Then what we're going to do is we're going to build our business process flow. It sounds far more complicated than it actually is. I'm going to click new flow, and we're going to build a business process flow. Name your business process flow. I'm going to call it demo BPF help desk, and add that in there. That's great. And then I need to choose a table, and so that's the IT request. There it is. and then we select create. And we're going to get a slightly different UI to anything that we've seen before. So it's going to also feel a little odd. And this UI is the method by which we tell it the fields that we need to use. So what we have are a series of stages. I'm just going to actually break it down into maybe 2 stages. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say at that first stage, I'm going to say, well, what are we going to do in that first stage? Well, actually, I'm going to say, well, you need to enter the data for a particular field. And I might say that actually what we need to do is bring in the contact, apply. Then what I might need to do is add another one in there. And that would be another data step. And we were going to pop that in there. And it's going to be a different field that we need on this occasion. So we'll say that it is the field for the IT request name, apply that, and then add another data step. We should have some details here, request detail, and I was just making sure that I had the different fields there, then apply that. And then what we might do is to add in another stage here. And within that stage, we would add in another data step. And in this case, we would bring in, well, there's 2 data steps in there. And we'd actually say the field that we're interested in on this occasion. So maybe it's the priority field. And then on this data step here, maybe we're interested in the severity of that, and then click apply. So then what we need to do is we need to save it. We'll need to validate and activate it. And we can see there's an error in this stage. So let's go and have a look at that. We haven't actually entered the data correctly on this. So let's go onto there and we'll select the, let's select the users affected. And then we'll apply that. And so we can see that we've got users affected and severity, then select apply. And then we can save. Once again, we're going to validate it again. Validation successful. Then we need to activate it. It's really important to actually activate it within Dataverse. So we're going to activate that. And as you can see at the top, it's activated mainly because it's actually indicating that we have the option to deactivate it. At this point in time, we can actually close this window and then return to the Solution Explorer. As you can see, within our flows, if we actually move to business process flows, we can actually see the business process flow that we actually created recently. What we're now going to do is return to our solution and bring that business process flow into our solution. So we'll select the IT Helpdesk demo, and what we'll do is we'll select add existing, then we'll move across to automation, and it will be a process, and we'll just search for the process. Demo BPF Helpdesk, go move in there, and then we'll add that. And as you can see, it's now moved into there, and we can actually select that particular process to actually look at it within the context of the solution. Now I've moved back to the Solution Explorer, I can actually select the apps, then I can select one of my model drone apps. I'm going to use the top one here and then select play. Then what we can do is we can create a new record and we'll actually see the business process flow kicking off. So if I actually go onto the IT requests and I select new, what we'll see is in any moment the business process flow will fire up, and what we can do is then we can go and look for a contact. We can put in our demo contact, we do our request detail, which is test, and request name test 123, and then that means that we can move to the next stage. The users affected, we can put in a number, maybe 5, and then the severity we can put as medium, and then that means we've entered the data in the order in which we wanted to. So that takes us to the end of the process of building a very simple model-driven app. You can see that we can actually extend this a lot further, have more tables, more relationships, and what we saw in this, we hopefully have now discovered what is a model-driven Power App. We also can see that maybe it's a bit different to Canvas apps. There's actually less things arguably that we can do, but we can see that it has got these business process flows with an awful lot of control. It's actually quite quick to use, so there's a lot of advantages to do it, and actually we built the app really quickly. The demo we did was around building a simple IT help desk, and we did that using Dataverse. We saw that we built tables, and actually when we looked at building the model-driven app, we saw they were called entities elsewhere. And we built some fields and forms, and we did the business process flow. We also saw that you can create views, and you can actually create multiple views for each table. And we actually created a relationship with another table so that we can then make updates to it. And then we finally we went through the entire process of building that, and we did that in both ways of building a model-driven Power App. If you like sessions on the Power Platform, do make sure you do make sure you subscribe so you find out about new content as it comes out. Hope you've enjoyed the session, and I'll see you another time.